A person walks past a crowded room, glances at one stranger for half a second, and something in their chest lurches. Their heart speeds up, their palms go slightly damp. Their thoughts, which a moment ago were about lunch or rent, suddenly bend toward this one face they have never seen before. Nothing has actually happened. No words have been exchanged, no decision has been made, and yet the whole nervous system has quietly rung a bell, and for the next few days, that one person will keep floating up in the mind at odd moments, uninvited, like a song stuck on repeat. We treat this as one of the most human things there is. It fills our poems, our songs, our films, our most expensive weddings. We build entire lives around the assumption that finding one particular person and becoming helplessly fixed on them is simply what people do. But when you look at it coldly, as a biologist would, it is genuinely bizarre. Here is an animal that will ignore food, lose sleep, take insane risks, and rearrange its whole future, all because of a chemical reaction triggered by another animal's face. No other appetite works quite like this. Hunger goes away when you eat, thirst goes away when you drink. But this thing sharpens the more you feed it. So here is the real question this whole video is built around, and it is stranger than it first sounds. Is romantic love a genuine, ancient piece of the human animal, something the first people felt around a fire 100,000 years ago? Or is it a modern invention, a story we cooked up somewhere along the way and then taught everyone else to feel, the way we taught them to want diamond rings and Valentine's cards? Did a caveman ever lie awake aching over someone? Or is that ache a recent piece of software, installed by poets and marketing? If questions like this make your brain lean forward, this is a good channel to subscribe to, because we chase exactly these threads all the way down to the bone, and this one goes very deep. Because for a surprisingly long time, a lot of serious thinkers were quietly sure that romantic love was modern. The idea went like this: real, passionate, one-person obsessed love was more or less invented by medieval European poets, the troubadours, somewhere around the 12th century, as a kind of luxury emotion for people with time on their hands. Before that, the story went, marriage was just business. It was about land, alliances, labor, and children. Love, if it existed at all, was a bonus that might grow later, not the reason two people got together. And for a species that spent most of its history scraping to survive, the idea of swooning over one special soul looked like an expensive fantasy nobody could afford. But then two anthropologists went and actually checked. In 1992, William Jankowiak and Edward Fisher published a study that quietly demolished the whole "love is a Western invention" idea. They took a huge database of world cultures, 166 of them, drawn from every kind of society on the planet, and they hunted through the records for hard signs of romantic love. Not marriage, not sex. The specific thing: longing, passion, the pain of separation, love songs, elopements, people running off together against the rules. And they found clear evidence of it in about 89% of those cultures. In the small handful where they did not find it, the honest conclusion was usually that nobody had bothered to ask the right questions. Not that the feeling was truly absent. Romantic love was not a European luxury at all. It was very close to universal. And once you know it turns up almost everywhere, in tiny hunter-gatherer bands and vast empires alike, in societies that had never heard of a troubadour, the modern invention theory falls apart. You do not get the same complicated feeling appearing independently in the Amazon, the Arctic, and the Australian outback because everyone copied French poets. You get it everywhere because it is built in, which pushes the question off the map of culture entirely and drops it into biology. If love is standard equipment in the human animal, then it is not really a feeling at all. It is a system, and systems can be taken apart. The person who took it apart more famously than anyone is the anthropologist Helen Fisher, who spent her career arguing that what we lump together as love is actually three separate brain systems, running on three different sets of chemicals that evolved for three different jobs. And once you see them split apart, a huge amount of confusing human behavior suddenly makes sense. The first system is lust, the raw sex drive, and it runs mostly on the sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. Its job is blunt: push you toward mating, more or less with anyone suitable. It does not care who. It just wants you in the game. But the second system is where things get strange, because the second system is romantic attraction, and it does the opposite of lust. Its whole purpose is to take all that broad, undirected energy and aim it at one single person, like a spotlight narrowing to a dot. This is the mad, sleepless, obsessive stage, the one that writes the poems, and it runs on a different chemistry. It is soaked in dopamine, the brain's reward and craving chemical, along with norepinephrine, which speeds the heart and sharpens focus. And crucially, Fisher argued, it comes with a drop in serotonin. Hold on to that detail, because a low serotonin state is not just any mood. It is going to explain something very unsettling about the way love actually feels. And the third system is attachment, the calm, deep, long-haul bond that can hold two people together for decades after the fireworks have faded. It runs on yet another pair of chemicals, oxytocin and vasopressin, the same molecules that bind a mother to her newborn. Its job is not passion but persistence, the quiet gravity that keeps a couple side by side long after they have stopped feeling dizzy. And here is the part that explains half the messiness of human romantic life. These three systems are separate, so they can point in different directions at the same time. You can feel deep attachment to one person, romantic obsession with another, and plain lust for a third, all at once and all real. Love was never one clean thing. It was always three engines bolted together, sometimes pulling against each other. So that is the theory, but you can actually watch these systems switch on inside a living brain, and that is where this stops being a story and becomes hard evidence. In 2005, Helen Fisher, together with Arthur Aaron and Lucy Brown, put people who had recently fallen wildly in love into an fMRI scanner and showed them a photograph of the person they were obsessed with. Then they watched what lit up. It was not the soft, poetic parts of the brain you might expect. What flared to life was a small, deep, ancient region called the ventral tegmental area, part of the brain's core reward circuit. It is one of the most primitive pieces of neural machinery we have, and it does not deal in tenderness. It deals in wanting. And here is the detail that should make the hair on your arms stand up. That same reward region, the one blazing away in the brain of a person newly in love, is the exact region that lights up in the brain of someone craving cocaine. It is a wanting machine, a motivation engine, and love hijacks it completely. This is why Fisher stopped describing early romantic love as an emotion at all. She started calling it a drive, something closer to hunger or thirst than to happiness, a raw need pushing you toward a goal. The goal just happens to be a person, so the giddy, floating feeling of new love is, at the level of the brain, running on the same hardware as addiction. And that is not a metaphor, that is the scan. Which brings us back to that dropped serotonin, and to something genuinely uncomfortable. Back in 1999, an Italian researcher named Donatella Marazziti tested the blood of people in the first throes of new love and compared it to two other groups, people with obsessive-compulsive disorder and calm, unbothered people. And the fresh lovers did not match the calm people. Their serotonin levels had crashed down to roughly the same low level as the people with OCD. Think about what that actually means. The reason a person in early love cannot stop thinking about their beloved, checks their phone 40 times an hour, replays every conversation, and feels a low hum of anxiety under the joy, is that their brain chemistry has genuinely shifted into something resembling a mild obsessive disorder. Love does not just feel like an intrusive thought that will not leave. Chemically, for a while, it partly is one. And if love runs on the machinery of addiction, then it should come with the ugliest feature of addiction, which is withdrawal. And it does. When a relationship ends and you are the one who did not want it to, the crash is not just sadness. In a 2010 study, Helen Fisher's team scanned the brains of people who had just been dumped and still loved the person who left them. Shown a photo of their ex, their brains again lit up in the reward and craving regions. Still wanting, but now with the reward permanently withheld, plus areas tied to physical pain and to the distress of losing something. This is why heartbreak can feel like a bodily illness, why people genuinely lose their appetite and cannot sleep, and describe a physical ache in the chest. It is a brain in withdrawal from a drug that has walked out the door. The system that pulled you toward that person is still firing. It just has nowhere to send the signal anymore. So love, at the level of the brain, is old and blind and chemical. But the deepest proof that this machinery predates humanity entirely does not come from people at all. It comes from a small, unremarkable rodent, and the story of that rodent is one of the most beautiful in all of biology. The animal is the prairie vole, a stubby little grassland mouse relative from the American Midwest. And prairie voles do something that fewer than 5% of mammals do. They form lifelong pair bonds. A male and a female meet, mate, and then stick together, sharing a nest, raising pups as a team, and preferring each other's company for the rest of their lives. They are, for a rodent, romantics. And here is what makes them a scientific goldmine. There is a second, nearly identical species, the montane vole, that lives up in the mountains and looks almost the same, but behaves like the exact opposite. Montane voles are loners. They mate and move on. No bond, no shared nest, no loyalty. Two closely related animals, one devoted and one indifferent, which gives researchers a perfect natural experiment. Whatever chemical difference separates these two species is, more or less, the recipe for lifelong love. And over decades of work, scientists like Sue Carter and Larry Young narrowed it down to those same two chemicals we already met in the human attachment system, oxytocin and vasopressin. The difference between the faithful vole and the faithless one turned out to be largely about where their brains have the receptors that catch those chemicals. The loyal prairie vole has oxytocin and vasopressin receptors packed into its brain's reward centers, so when it mates, the bonding chemicals and the pleasure of reward get wired to the same partner, and that particular individual becomes linked, in the brain, to feeling good. Block those chemicals in a prairie vole, and the bond never forms, even after mating. Boost the vasopressin system, and researchers could get males to bond faster and guard their partners more fiercely. In some experiments, tinkering with a single gene's activity could shift how strongly the animals paired up. Love, in a vole, could be turned up or down like a dial. But this is exactly where honesty matters, and where a lot of pop science gets it wrong, so let me hedge it properly. It is tempting to say scientists found the love gene, and headlines did say that. The real picture is messier. Pair bonding involves many genes and many brain regions, not one magic switch, and later work showed the story is more complicated than the tidy early version, with some effects proving harder to reproduce. But the core discovery is rock solid, and it is the part that matters here. The deep bond between two mates is not a mystical human specialty. It is built from ancient, specific brain chemistry, chemistry we share with a mouse, chemistry that was clearly running in mammals long before anything like a human walked the earth. When two people fall into a lasting bond, they are using a piece of equipment field-tested in rodents millions of years ago. So the machinery is old, but that raises the real evolutionary puzzle, the one that actually explains why any of this exists. Why did humans evolve to bond in the first place? Most mammals do not. A stag does not stay to raise the fawns. So what made our ancestors different? And the leading answer is genuinely humbling, because it means romantic love may exist for one blunt reason. Human babies are catastrophically, dangerously helpless. A human infant is born so early, with such a huge and unfinished brain, that it can do essentially nothing for itself for years. A newborn foal stands up within an hour. A newborn human cannot hold up its own head. And a baby that useless is a crushing amount of work, too much, in the harsh math of the deep past, for one exhausted mother to reliably carry alone. Which creates evolutionary pressure for a second helper to stick around, a father, or at least a committed partner, to bring food, share the load, and keep the vulnerable pair alive. But evolution cannot rely on anyone choosing to stay out of the goodness of their heart. It needs a mechanism, a force strong enough to override an animal's natural drift toward moving on to the next mate. And that force, many researchers argue, is exactly what romantic love and attachment are for. The obsession glues two people together long enough to conceive and bond. The calmer attachment holds them there long enough to get a defenseless child through its most fragile years. Love, in this view, is the leash evolution invented to keep a parent from wandering off. One influential version of this comes from the anthropologist Owen Lovejoy, who argued in a famous 1981 paper that pair bonding was central to how humans became human in the first place. His provisioning hypothesis runs like this: a male who brought food to one particular female and her offspring gave those children a real survival edge, which meant faithful, providing males left more surviving descendants. Over time, this could have favored monogamy-ish bonding, and even, he suggested, walking upright, since hands busy carrying food back to a mate cannot also be walking on knuckles. Whether or not every part of that holds, the core idea is powerful. The strange, intense way humans bond may be tangled up with the deepest roots of our whole species. And there is a related, hotly debated clue hiding in human bodies: concealed ovulation. In most mammals, it is loudly obvious when a female is fertile. In humans, it is hidden, even largely, from the woman herself. Nobody is fully sure why, and there are competing theories, so treat this as an open question rather than a settled fact. But one popular idea is that hidden fertility helped bind mates together. If a male cannot tell exactly when conception is possible, his best bet to father children is to stick around consistently, staying close and attentive all month long. In that reading, the very mystery of the human body is another quiet mechanism nudging two people to stay together. Once again, what feels like romance may be biology playing a long game. So now we hit the turn, the place where the whole picture flips over, and it is worth stopping on, because it inverts almost everything we are taught to feel about love. We are trained to think of romantic love as the soft stuff of life, the luxury, the decoration, the greeting card you buy after the serious business of survival is handled, the fluffy, optional, slightly silly part of being human. But look again at everything we have just seen: the hijacked reward circuit, the addiction chemistry, the obsessive low serotonin fixation, the bonding molecules borrowed from a rodent. The whole apparatus built to trap two adults together around a helpless child. None of that is soft. Romantic love is not a luxury sitting on top of survival. It is survival. It is one of the most ruthless, calculating pieces of machinery evolution ever built, and its purpose has nothing to do with your happiness. Its purpose is to override your self-interest chemically so completely that you will exhaust yourself, take real risks, and pour years into keeping another person's genes alive alongside your own. The magic of love, the feeling that you have found your one irreplaceable person, is the subjective experience of a chemical leash tightening. It feels like the most free and personal thing you will ever do. It is, in cold fact, an ancient survival program executing exactly as designed. And once you understand that, Ancient human love stops being a sweet romantic footnote and becomes deadly serious. It was the thing keeping the whole fragile species alive. Which means those early humans did not just feel this, they lived and died by it. And astonishingly, we can sometimes see it. Because if love this deep really ran in ancient people, it should occasionally leave a mark in the ground, and now and then, it seems to. In 2007, near Mantua in northern Italy, archaeologists uncovered a burial that stopped everyone in their tracks. Two skeletons, a young man and a young woman, buried together around 6,000 years ago, facing each other, arms and legs entwined, in what looks unmistakably like an embrace. The press called them the Lovers of Valdaro, and it is hard to look at the photograph and feel nothing. But here I have to slam on the brakes, because this is exactly where romantic imagination runs ahead of the evidence. We do not actually know these two were lovers. We do not know how they died or why they were arranged that way. The embrace could be devotion, or it could be a burial custom whose meaning is completely lost to us. The same caution applies to another famous pair, the embracing skeletons found at Hassanlu in Iran, sometimes read as a tender couple in their final moment, though the reality of that sight is grim and contested, and probably not romantic at all. The point is not that these were definitely soulmates. The point is subtler, and honestly, more moving. Someone who was alive back then cared enough to place two bodies together with deliberate tenderness. The love we are chasing is not in the bones. It is in the hands that arrange them. And that clue, careful burial, turns out to be one of the strongest windows we have into ancient feeling, because a grave is a lot of work for people with nothing to spare. Around 34,000 years ago, at a site called Sungir, in what is now Russia, people buried their dead covered in thousands of hand-carved mammoth ivory beads, each one representing hours of labor, along with two children laid head-to-head with astonishing riches. Nobody spends that kind of effort on a body they did not care about. You do not exhaust yourself decorating the dead unless losing them meant something. Deliberate, loving burial is one of the oldest fingerprints of deep human attachment we possess. Older than farming, older than cities, pressed into the earth again and again. Because here is the flip side that proves the whole thing, and it is a hard one. The surest evidence that ancient humans loved is that ancient humans grieved. Grief is not a separate emotion bolted onto love. It is the attachment system running in reverse, the bond still pulling at full strength toward a person who is no longer there, with nowhere for the signal to go. You do not mourn what you were not bonded to, so every ancient grave dug with care, every body arranged with tenderness, every offering left for the dead, is really a photograph of love, developed only after the person was gone. Grief is love's shadow, and the shadow shows up in the archaeological record long before any love poem was ever written. And grief, like the bonding chemistry itself, is older than humanity, which is the final proof that none of this is a human invention. Elephants are the clearest example. When an elephant dies, others in the herd will gather around the body, touch it gently with their trunks, stand in near silence for what looks like a vigil, and sometimes return to the bones months or years later to touch them again. Researchers have watched elephants linger over the remains of their own dead in ways that are extraordinarily hard to explain as anything but mourning. Other animals show versions of it too, from primates who carry dead infants for days to certain whales. The capacity to be shattered by a loss is not ours alone. It is the price of the bond, paid across many species, and our ancestors paid it too. So the feeling is ancient and shared. But now we run into a real and fascinating tension, because if love is universal biology, why do human societies treat it so wildly differently? For most of history, in most places, marriage was not built on romantic love at all. It was arranged, a contract between families about property, alliance, and labor, with the couple's feelings treated as a minor detail or ignored completely. Love and marriage were often two separate things, and everyone knew it. Passionate love was real, yes, but it was frequently something that happened outside or before the practical business of a marriage, not the foundation of it. The idea that you should marry the person you are wildly in love with is, in the long view of human history, genuinely unusual. And some cultures drew the line between love and partnership in ways that can startle us. Among the Wari, an Amazonian people, ethnographers described attitudes towards sex and pairing very unlike the Western romantic script, where relationships and bodies were understood through a different logic entirely. The lesson anthropologists keep drawing is not that these people lacked feeling, but that the same underlying biology, the same three brain systems, gets wrapped in dramatically different rules, meanings, and stories depending on where you are born. The engine is universal. The bodywork bolted around it is culture, and culture varies enormously. But even in worlds where marriage was pure arrangement, the raw ache of romantic love kept leaking out, and it left proof in the most touching form imaginable, poetry, because people have always written love down. The oldest love poem we know of is a small clay tablet held in a museum in Istanbul, catalogued with the deeply unromantic name Istanbul 2461. It is Sumerian, written around 4,000 years ago, and it is a passionate address from a bride to a king, full of longing and sweetness, calling him her honey, begging him to take her to the bedchamber. 4,000 years ago, before almost anything we would recognize as history, a human being felt the exact same rush that lurches through a chest today, and cared enough to press it into clay so it would not be lost. The words survived the empire that made them. And once you accept that love this old is real biology, the darker parts of it suddenly make sense too, because a survival system this powerful comes with teeth. Jealousy, for instance, is not a character flaw. It is mate guarding, an ancient defense of the pair bond against rivals, found across cultures and echoed in animals, evolution's crude alarm system for protecting an investment. And the physical devastation of heartbreak may run deeper than mood. There is a real, documented condition doctors call Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, nicknamed broken heart syndrome, in which a sudden emotional shock, sometimes the loss of a loved one, floods the body with stress hormones and can temporarily stun the heart muscle into failing, mimicking a heart attack. I will hedge that this is rare and not the everyday cause of a sad chest ache, but it is real. A person can, in a narrow medical sense, be so grief-struck that the heart itself falters. And there is a strange counterweight built into the same machinery, a reminder that this system was designed by survival, not by romance. It is called the Coolidge effect, and it is the well-documented tendency, seen clearly across many mammals, for a male's sexual interest to fade with a familiar partner but come roaring back at the introduction of a new one. It sits in awkward tension with all that beautiful bonding chemistry, and that tension is the whole truth of it. We are animals carrying both programs at once, the ancient drive to bond deeply and stay, and the equally ancient drive to spread wider. Human love has always been a negotiation between those two forces, and every culture's rules about marriage and fidelity are, in a sense, attempts to manage that built-in conflict. So gather all of it up, the 89% of cultures with love in them, the 3 brain systems and their 3 chemistries, the reward circuit blazing like an addiction, the crashed serotonin of obsession, the withdrawal of heartbreak, the faithful vole and the faithless one, and the bonding molecules we borrowed from a mouse, the helpless baby that needed 2 carers, and the leash evolution built to keep them close. The entwined skeletons we must not overread, the ivory beads at Sungear, the mourning elephant, the 4,000-year-old poem pressed into clay. None of it is decoration. All of it is one ancient program, older than our species, half tenderness and half machinery, running underneath a feeling we insist is entirely our own. And that is the quiet truth hiding under a question that sounds almost too simple to ask. Did ancient humans fall in love? They did, in exactly the way it still happens, with the same lurch in the chest, the same sleepless nights, the same unbearable ache when it ended. The fire has become a phone screen glowing in a dark room. The clay tablet has become a message, typed and deleted and typed again. But the animal doing it, the one fixed helplessly on a single face, running old chemistry it did not choose and cannot switch off, is exactly the same animal that sat in the cold 30,000 years ago and buried someone it could not bear to lose. They were not waiting to invent love. They were already inside it, the way people always have been, leaning toward the warmth of one particular person in the dark.